Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose illusory energy the Jiva, who is part and parcel of God, forgets his real identity because of the bodily concept of life. I take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose glories are difficult to understand. Please repeat. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose illusory energy the Jiva, who is part and parcel of God, forgets his real identity because of the bodily concept of life. I take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose glories are difficult to understand. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, every living entity, regardless of whether he be human, demigod, animal, bird, bee, or whatever, is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord and the living entity are intimately related. The Lord and the living entity are intimately related like father and son. Unfortunately, because of material contact, the living entity forgets this and wants to enjoy the material world independently, according to his own plan. This illusion, Maya, is very difficult to surmount. Maya covers the living entity because of his willingness to forget the Supreme Personality of Godhead and make his own plan to enjoy this material world. As long as this contamination continues, the conditioned soul will be unable to understand his real identity and will perpetually continue under illusion, life after life. Ato griha kshetra sutapta vitaya janasya mohoyam aham mameti. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 5, Text 8. As long as the living entity is not enlightened so that he may understand his real position, he may be attracted to materialistic life, to house, country, or field, to society, sons, family, community, bank balance, and so on. Covered by all this, he will continue to think, I am this body, and everything related to this body is mine. This materialistic conception of life is extremely difficult to surmount, but one who surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as did Gajendra, the king of the elephants, comes to enlightenment on the Brahman platform. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nasuchati Nakankshate Samach Sarveshu Bhuteshu Madbhaktin Labhate Parang. One who is transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward all living entities. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 18, Text 54. Since a devotee is completely on the Brahman platform, he is not jealous of any other living entity. Samach Sarveshu Bhuteshu. Nayam Veda Swamatmanam Yachakchaham Dhiya Hatam Tang Durachaya Mahatmyang Bhagavantam Mitosmyaham. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose illusory energy the Jiva, who is part and parcel of God, forgets his real identity because of the bodily concept of life. I take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose glories are difficult to understand. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vistang Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So with your permission, we'll try and say something appropriate, especially with permission of Bhakti Rasamrita Swami. Hare Krishna. I felt a little bit fearful when he walked through the door. So this is the prayers of Gajendra. I recall recently when Bhakti Rasamrita Swami gave class, he was mentioning that sometimes we like to skip the prayers. So I remember as a new Bhakta, when I was reading Krishna book, I didn't find the prayers of the Vedas personified very interesting, so I would skip it. But now, strange how things change. I now consider that to be one of the most important chapters of the 10th canto. I think factually speaking, the learned devotees will agree that the prayers of the Vedas personified is a special chapter of the 10th canto. So it's about we try and cultivate a taste for Krishna consciousness in its various aspects. And sometimes it may take many years before we can appreciate certain aspects of devotional service. So prayers, they're often very philosophical. We have elements of expressions of humility or longing. We have glorification of the Lord. So many aspects are there in prayer, and it's very spiritually enlivening if we can have sufficient insight into those prayers, which requires the mercy of the Lord. And through the Lord's mercy, we can understand the deeper devotional aspects of Srimad Bhagavatam and the prayers that are there. Srila Prabhupada very much appreciated the prayers of Queen Kunti. I think that was his favorite chapter of the whole Bhagavatam. And we have prayers of Prahlad Maharaj, also very important. And if you consider prayer is one of the 9 processes of devotional service. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, Bhajanera Maji Shreshta Navavida Bhakti, Krishna Prema Krishna Diti, Dhori Mahashakti. That of all the means of devotional service, the topmost is the 9 processes. Those 9 processes, they're very potent, Mahashakti, to give Krishna and to give Krishna Prema. Taramaji Sarva Shreshta Nama Sankirtan. And of those 9, the topmost is Nam Sankirtan. Now in the Sandarbhas, Jiva Goswami has said, Yajyapi Anya Bhakti Kala Kartavya Tadab Kirtanakya Bhakti Samyogenaiva. Although in Kali Yuga all 9 processes are recommended, they must be done in conjunction with Kirtan in order to be effective. Very important. They must be done in conjunction with Kirtan. So Vandana, prayer, that is one of the 9 processes. It's quite interesting in the Harinam Chintamani, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that now these 9 processes, they are sadhana, but when one attains the platform of perfection, those activities continue. And it's actually said that sadhana and sajja, the goal, they become non-different. So we shouldn't think that prayers are meant to bring us to some point and then we stop these prayers. These prayers actually continue, as do all the 9 processes of devotional service. He uses the term sadhana for process and sajja for the goal. He also gives other terms. Upaya is the process and upeya is the goal. Simply a different way to look at it. So today's prayer, well, the first line, it reflects the nature of conditioned life. Nayam Veda Svamatmanam, which means we do not know our real identity. This is a serious problem, right? I mean, if you imagine someone bumped their head and they had amnesia and they forgot who they were, what would be your tactic? What would you try and do? You would try and get this person to realize who they are, right? To remember who they are. You wouldn't just say, oh, it doesn't matter, carry on with life. No, important to find out who you are. So practically speaking, our condition is like that. We all have amnesia. we have forgotten who we are. We have an eternal identity with Krishna in relationship to Krishna, but we've forgotten who we are. So that's a serious problem. And if we go on life not addressing this problem, we're like someone with amnesia. So it's a crazy situation. Now the cause, well, the next line, it gives the cause of this with the term Yat Shaktya, which is translated as by whose influence. Shakti means what? What does Shakti mean? Energy, yes. So the forgetfulness is due to energy. So which energy makes us forget? Mahamaya, yes. We could also say Avarana, was it? Avaranatmaka Shakti, the covering potency. We could say Ahankar, false ego. Ahankara vimuddatma, kartaham iti manyate. Bewildered by false ego, one thinks oneself the doer. Now in this line there's Yat Shakti, one reason. Another reason is Aham Diya, which is related. Aham Diya meaning false ego. So false ego is one of the energies. Bhumir apal nalo vayu kangmano budire vacha ahankara iti yami bina prakriti rastada. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. These 8 are the separated energies of the Lord. So it's understood that this false ego, it's actually described in the 2nd chapter of Jaiva Dharma, that the jiva's original pure ego is that of servant of Krishna, and then that ego, pure ego, becomes covered by false ego, and then one starts to identify with one's country, with one's body, with one's family, etc. It's interesting that, this purport is a lot about the fall down of the jiva. So we want to avoid getting into the whole topic of the fall down of the jiva, because Prabhupada said it's like crow-tal logic. He gives the example that a group of scholars, they see a crow, it lands on a tal tree, the tal fruit falls, and then they start debating. And one says, the crow hit the branch, and that caused the tal fruit to fall. And another scholar says, no, what happened was the crow was just about to land, and then the fruit just fell anyway. And then a third scholar says, no, what happened was the crow landed on the fruit, and just that little extra weight caused the fruit to fall. So this is absurd, it's waste of time, right? So Prabhupada would say that too much discussion about the origin of the jiva, or how the jiva fell down, is ultimately a waste of time, and that we should be more interested in going back home, back to Godhead. So we shouldn't discuss it. After saying that, I'm just about to discuss a little bit about it, sorry. Just to point out one thing that it's very common. I notice devotees, they very often say that, well, Bhaktivinoda Thakur taught differently from Prabhupada. He said we weren't once with Krishna. Well, he may say that some places, but he also, as I mentioned just a moment ago, he also said that we were once servants of Krishna. That was our pure ego, and then we became covered. So he actually says both things. So it's not quite cut and dry. Anyway, so this process, there are a lot of verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and also there's one verse in Prema Vivarta that's described the fall down of the jiva. Does anyone know these verses? I'll give you one. If I give you one of... Oh, Prabhuji. Yes, that's from Prema Vivarta, right? Krishna bahir mukha hoya bhogavancha kori nikatasta maya tari japati adhori. That the living entity turns his back on Krishna and tries to enjoy material nature. And therefore Maya then slaps him down. Now in this verse, the term is nikatasta, which means Maya is right next to us. On one occasion, Lakshmi Moni, she gives this little pastime, this little comment that Prabhupada made. It's found in Prabhupada Memories. She said, on one occasion, Prabhupada said, you don't have to go looking for Maya. Maya is the backside of Krishna. So there's no third option. We have this concept, it's actually just illusion. We think, well, I can either be the Krishna conscious, or I can be in Maya, but then I can also just kind of take a break but not be in Maya. right? We think, I'll go for the third option because it's easier, right? But actually that doesn't exist, because if you turn your back on Krishna, well, Maya is the backside of Krishna, so you don't have to look for Maya. She's automatically there if you're not Krishna conscious. So if we reflect upon this, we should become very serious about trying to always be Krishna conscious, 24 hours a day. That's the essence of all advice. One should be thinking of Krishna 24 hours a day. So that's the fall down of the jiva according to Prema Vivarta. Now in the Chaitanya Charitamrita there are several verses, similar verses. One of them is very famous, and I'm sure someone knows it. Krishna Bhuli Se Jiva Anadi Bahyamukha Atta Eva Maya Tari Deya Sangsara Dukkha. That since time immemorial, the living entity has forgotten Krishna, and therefore Maya is inflicting all kinds of suffering upon the jiva. Now there's another one, Krishna Bahyamukha Doshi Maya Hoiti Bhaya Krishnan Mukha Bhakti Hoiti Maya Mukta Hoya. This is stating that when we turn our back on Krishna, then Maya puts us in a fearful condition, and when we engage in devotional service, then we become liberated. And there's another one, Krishna Nitya Dasa Jiva Taha Buli Gela E Doshi Mayatara Galaya Bandila. That the living entity is the eternal servant of Krishna, but due to forgetfulness, Maya has bound the living entity by the neck. So any sane person, if they reflect upon this, then we see that we are actually bound by the neck, so to speak. It's like when you walk your dog and you pull it. So the dog has got its lead on, it's got its collar, and it's always getting pulled here and there. So that's practically speaking the condition of the living entity. We're all bound. We're bound by the modes of material nature, asha pasha shita badha, bound by hundreds of desires. And we see how these desires, they lead to so much suffering. People with addiction, they suffer. There are all types of addiction. One of the most common ones is the love for money. This becomes an addiction. And for the sake of money, people will do all kinds of things. They will overwork, cause themselves stress. Recently, in one of the newspapers, it was saying that the biggest cause of death now is hypertension. It used to be heart attack. Hypertension is now the biggest cause of death. Now that is just purely due to material desires that force people to act in such a way as to increase the pace of their material life. One time one person commented that people spend money they don't have buying things they don't need to please people, not to show off to people they don't like. That's practically speaking material life. It's called keeping up with the Joneses, right? Well, so-and-so's got a nice car. I won't get a nice car like that. I don't have money for it, but I'll take out a loan and then I'll work like a dog in order to pay off this car, just because I don't want my neighbor who I hate to think that he's better than me. This is the kind of mentality that goes on. So we just create our own suffering due to material desires. So the solution, well, what is the solution? I mean, today's verse, it's all about false ego. In the purport, Prabhupada quotes from the 5th canto. Mato kriya kshetra sutaptavitaya jinasya mohoyam aham mameti. The illusion, which takes two forms, aham and mama, I and mine. So this is the second part of a famous verse. It's Lord Rishabdev speaking to his sons. Pumshastriya mituni bhavamitan tayor mito hridaya granti mahu atogriya kshetra sutaptavitaya jinasya mohoyam aham mameti. The material life begins with the attraction between male and female. And from that attraction develops aham, mama, I and mine. And when that attraction expands into house, bank balance, children, wife, and so forth. In the 10th canto there's this statement, Yashatma buddhi kunape tritatuki svadi kalatradeshu bam ajadi yatirta padi tita buddhi salile lakar hichich janeshva bigyeshu sa eva go karaha. Now one who thinks the body to be the self, or one who thinks one's wife and property and children to belong to oneself, one who thinks that the the land of one's birth is worshipable. Or, there's another, that is Bauma Ijadi. Another version for this is one who considers the deity to be stone, I believe. And yet Tirtabudi Salile, to consider the holy places to be simply places of water, and one who does not go to those places in order to hear from the sadhu, then that person is a cow or an ass. That is the heavy statement in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So all this false ego, which makes us think we are this body, this is my house, this is my wife, these are my children, this is my bank balance. All this illusion is coming from the false ego. And it can be traced back to that original male-female sexual attraction, which can be traced back to turning our back on Krishna. As soon as we turn our back on Krishna, then we become contaminated. The false ego takes over. So what is the solution? How do we get out of this situation? Say again? Turn our back towards Krishna. Turn our face towards Krishna. Okay, so how do I do that? Is that an easy thing to do? This is the thing, when we know what's the right thing to do, immediately we think, okay, I'll just do it, right? I'll just turn my face towards Krishna. But then we find after 10, 20, 30 years in devotional service, we're still absorbed in the illusory energy. So your answer is correct, but it's not, there's something not quite working here, right? So how do we turn our face to Krishna? I mean, it can be done in 1 second, right? There's some purport in the Bhagavad Gita. It says Krishna consciousness can happen in a moment, or it can happen after many lifetimes. So how do we do it if it's not happened yet? How do we do it? Start by being conscious with your relationship with Krishna. Now, but we don't know our relationship with Krishna, right? Okay, so think ourselves as eternal servant. That's, yeah. Okay, Prabhuji. Say again. Serve the devotees. Very good answer. Yeah. Okay, follow the rules and regulations of sadhana bhakti. Pray to Krishna. See everywhere Krishna. Yes. Surrender. Okay. Now, I'll change the question a little bit here. Today's verse is about the false ego. So you said perform sadhana bhakti, using a Tirtha Prabhu. Now, we want to get rid of false ego. So suppose you perform sadhana bhakti. So who's performing the bhakti? You see the problem, right? When you perform sadhana, you're thinking, I am doing this. Okay, follow the rules and regulations. Which, okay, it amounts to the same thing, right? Okay, so we have the problem here. If we do sadhana, we're doing sadhana, ultimately we want to dissolve the false ego. Now if we practice sadhana, then we have a problem because we're thinking that we are the doer. So we have a false ego, and with that false ego we perform sadhana. So how then do we overcome this problem? We have a real ego as well, right? So how do we drop the false ego and cultivating it? So how do you cultivate it? By practicing. Okay. Okay, there's one answer given in the 3rd canto. It's Lord Kapila Dev. He says, Savai nivrita dharmena vasudeva anukampaya bhagavad bhakti yogena tirodhati shanayariha. So that the false ego is gradually destroyed by 3 things. First, nivrita dharma, practicing detachment. Secondly, Vasudev anukampaya, by the mercy of the Lord. And thirdly, Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga, by devotional service. So of course sadhana, although it may be performed with ego, the actual process of sadhana will dissolve the ego. But one must perform sadhana, nivrita dharma, with detachment. Now this is a very important point. Quite recently, well, not that recent actually, I think it was in the previous canto, there was a verse, there was a purport where Prabhupada said I have set up this Hare Krishna movement to practice Nivritti Marg. Now, we have a problem because, as far as I can see, when Prabhupada set up the movement, it was Nivritti Marg, and it very much was Nivritti Marg in practice. I mean, you could go back to a time when Bhaktivedanta Manor, people were sleeping on the floor like one next to another. It was just packed out. It was very uncomfortable, and people were very enthusiastic, and they weren't thinking in terms of material comfort. So this is Nivritti, to be detached. If we start to develop Pravritti and mix it with devotional service, then we can understand that it's going to take a long time to become a pure devotee. So I like to always try and remember that ISKCON was set up to be Nivritti. So we've got to be hard on ourselves and really make an effort to be detached. We have the detachments, and if we cultivate them, we understand that it will take longer. I mean, it's not a lost cause. There's a statement in, I think it's the 5th canto, that Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki jai, Shri Shri Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shri Shri Gaurnitai ki jai. Well, there's a statement, Icha Pitanam Nitya Pada Palavam. The Lord's lotus feet have a special quality that they cover all other desires. In other words, if you approach the Lord with material desires, He will fulfill those desires in such a way that you no longer desire that thing. So if you are suffering from material desires, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't come before the Lord. You should still pray. Akama sarva kamova moksha kamo daradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Once you perform Tivra Bhakti Yoga, or intense devotional service, regardless of one's state of consciousness, whether one is full of desires, whether one is desiring liberation, or whether one is free from desires. So regardless of our situation, Icha Pitanam Nijapada Palavam, the Lord's lotus feet will remove all those material desires. But still, it will take longer. So Nivritta Dharma, be detached, Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga, perform devotional service, even with sadhana, even though you have an ego, the ego will be dissolved. But we should understand ultimately there's only one real cause, and that is Vasudev Anukampaya, the mercy of the Lord. And if we think that we can do it without the mercy of the Lord, then we will be doing our sadhana for many, many lifetimes. It's actually, one devotee was saying that it doesn't matter how many rounds you chant, ultimately, you must fail. He said you must fail materially and you must fail spiritually before you get the mercy. You see, material life, if we don't fail, we become very absorbed in material life. If we fail, we come to spiritual life. But if we become proud and we think we're a great devotee, then we're succeeding in our mind in spiritual life, but we're actually not succeeding, we're failing. But when we come to the point of surrender and we say, Krishna, I've tried, I've been chanting, nothing's working, I've got no taste, I don't even get on with devotees, I have no desire to get up early in the morning, and we start to really break down, we start to lament, and we say to Krishna, look, I need help. Then that's the moment then Krishna will help us. And if we're proud, I chanted 64 rounds, I chanted 128 rounds, I chanted 192 rounds or whatever, then Krishna He's looking, who is this fool? Ahankara vimudatma, kartaham iti manyate. He thinks he's the doer. So that is the consideration. So this verse, it's all about forgetting our identity, becoming bewildered by false ego. And the way back is to practice devotional service, await the mercy of the Lord, and do it with the mood of detachment. Hare Krishna. So there's 10 minutes left. I hope you have questions.